The courtroom buzzed with tension as people whispered among themselves, waiting for the trial to begin. It wasn't every day that a decorated war veteran stood on one side, and on the other, a police officer with a reputation for throwing his badge around like a weapon of power. Officer Raymond Clark sat at the plaintiff's table, his face radiating smugness. His crisp uniform seemed to be more for show than necessity, and the way he leaned back in his chair told everyone he believed he'd already won. After all, he was a cop. Who would dare question him? On the other side sat Daniel Mercer, a man whose presence alone commanded respect. He wasn't just any veteran, he was a combat-hardened soldier who had endured battles most men could only imagine. His face bore the lines of experience, and his eyes, sharp and unflinching, scanned the room with the calm intensity of someone who'd seen far worse than a courtroom. He wore a simple suit, nothing flashy, but his aura was unmistakable. This was a man who did not back down, no matter who stood against him. Officer Clark had expected Daniel to look nervous or desperate. Instead, Daniel looked unshaken, as if the courtroom was just another battlefield where strategy and patience would win the day. Clark smirked and muttered to his attorney, loud enough for Daniel to hear, "This will be over before it even starts." He has no idea who he's dealing with. The incident that led to this courtroom showdown had started weeks earlier. Clark, known among his colleagues for his aggressive behavior, had encountered Daniel during a routine traffic stop. But it was anything but routine. Clark had pulled Daniel over for a minor infraction, yet instead of conducting himself with professionalism, he barked orders, hurled insults, and even shoved Daniel when he questioned the unnecessary hostility. What Clark didn't realize was that Daniel had his dashcam running the entire time. He also didn't know that Daniel had the mental resilience of someone who had spent years in high-pressure combat zones, dealing with situations that made Clark's temper tantrums look like child's play. When Daniel filed a complaint about Clark's behavior, the officer laughed it off. "A complaint against me? Good luck with that," Clark had boasted to his fellow officers. "They'll believe me over some washed-up soldier any day." His arrogance was boundless. Not only did he deny the allegations, but he also countersued Daniel, claiming the veteran had been aggressive and noncompliant during the stop. It was a move Clark thought would bury the complaint and assert his dominance. What Clark hadn't anticipated was Daniel's meticulous preparation. While Clark assumed the badge made him untouchable, Daniel approached the case like a mission. He gathered every shred of evidence, videos, witness statements, and even character references from his military unit. Daniel's legal team was sharp, but even they admitted that their client's calm and strategic approach made him their greatest weapon. The judge entered, and the courtroom fell silent. Daniel remained seated, his posture straight, while Clark glanced around as if expecting everyone to be on his side. When the opening statements began, Clark's lawyer painted him as a dedicated officer, a hero who risked his life daily for the safety of the community. "This man," the lawyer said, pointing at Clark, "deserves respect, not baseless accusations from someone looking for a payout." Daniel's attorney rose next. Instead of grandstanding, she simply stated the facts. She described Daniel's years of service, his spotless record, and his history of standing up for what was right. She didn't embellish the story. She didn't need to. The truth was enough. She then promised that the court would see exactly what happened on the day of the incident, thanks to irrefutable video evidence. As the proceedings continued, Clark's confidence began to waver. Each time Daniel's attorney presented a piece of evidence, the smugness on his face chipped away. The dashcam footage was played, and the room grew tense. The video captured everything: the unnecessary aggression, the condescending tone, the physical shove that Clark had conveniently omitted from his report. The silence after the video played was deafening. For the first time, Clark's attorney seemed unsettled, scrambling to reframe the narrative. Daniel never raised his voice, never lost his composure. When he took the stand, he spoke with quiet authority. He explained the events in detail, not as a victim, but as a man who simply refused to be bullied. I've spent years defending people's rights and freedoms, Daniel said. I don't believe anyone, no matter the uniform they wear, should misuse their power. The gallery erupted in quiet murmurs. Even the judge seemed impressed by Daniel's composure and clarity. Clark, on the other hand, grew visibly irritated. He whispered harshly to his lawyer, his confidence unraveling with each passing minute. By the end of the first day of testimony, the dynamic in the room had shifted. The badge that Clark believed made him untouchable now felt like a weight dragging him down. People no longer looked at him with admiration, they saw him as a man who had abused his position. Meanwhile, Daniel walked out of the courtroom with the same calm expression he had worn all day. He wasn't fighting for fame, money, or revenge. He was fighting because it was the right thing to do. Outside the courthouse, reporters flocked to Daniel for comments, but he simply said, "This isn't about me. It's about accountability. No one is above the law, not even those who wear the badge." His words struck a chord with everyone listening, leaving Clark to stew in the growing realization that he had picked the wrong man to challenge. The courtroom was silent as the officer, his polished badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights, strutted to the witness stand with the confidence of a man who believed the system was built to protect him. His uniform was neatly pressed, his voice rehearsed and steady, but behind his eyes, a hint of arrogance flashed. He thought this would be easy. After all, how many times had he been in this situation and walked away without consequence? He looked at the veteran seated across the room, a man with broad shoulders, weathered skin, and eyes that had seen more than most could imagine, and assumed this would be no different. But he was wrong, dead wrong. The veteran sat calmly, his posture relaxed, though his presence seemed to fill every corner of the courtroom. He had endured years of combat, faced enemies far more dangerous than a corrupt officer hiding behind a badge, and survived battles that tested every ounce of his willpower. This was not the kind of man who would break under pressure or cower when falsely accused. He had come to court that day with one goal: to expose the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. As the officer began his testimony, spinning a carefully crafted story about a routine stop that escalated due to the veteran's aggression, the veteran's attorney rose to his feet. Every claim made by the officer was met with quiet but devastating counterpoints: surveillance footage, eyewitness testimony, and even audio recordings that painted a starkly different picture. The jury watched as the officer's confident tone wavered. What started as a performance turned into a scramble for excuses. The more he talked, the more the cracks in his story became apparent. The veteran's attorney brought forward witnesses who had been there that night. A shop owner who had recorded the incident on his security camera testified that it was the officer who escalated the situation, not the veteran. A passerby recalled how the officer had tried to provoke a confrontation, using his badge as a shield while verbally harassing the veteran. And when the veteran took the stand, the courtroom was riveted. He didn't raise his voice or embellish his account. He spoke with the kind of steady, unshakable authority that only comes from someone who has nothing to hide and everything to stand for. The officer tried to interrupt, muttering objections and shaking his head, but the judge's gavel silenced him. With each question from the defense, the veteran revealed another layer of truth: the officer's history of complaints, the pattern of abuse of power, and the night he chose the wrong man to target. The jury leaned forward, sensing that they were witnessing a rare moment where justice might actually prevail against someone who had long considered himself untouchable. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Every word seemed to carry the weight of years of frustration, anger, and betrayal from people who had been wronged by those sworn to protect them. The veteran's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the officer's growing desperation. His face turned red, sweat formed on his forehead, and his once proud posture slumped as he realized the tide was turning against him. For the first time in years, he felt fear, not the fear of losing a case, but the fear of finally being held accountable. The veteran's story wasn't just about that night, it was about the countless times men like him had been disrespected, overlooked, or targeted because someone with authority thought they could get away with it. He spoke about serving his country, About fighting for the freedoms that allowed men like this officer to wear a badge, and about the deep betrayal he felt when that badge was used to intimidate rather than protect. His words struck a chord with everyone in the room, including the judge, who sat listening intently, his expression unreadable but his eyes sharp. When cross-examination came, the officer's lawyer tried to trip the veteran up, asking pointed questions designed to paint him as unstable or aggressive. But the veteran didn't flinch. Every answer was precise, every statement backed by evidence or witness accounts. By the time he stepped down from the stand, it was clear that the narrative had shifted completely. The badge no longer looked like a symbol of authority, it looked like a shield for a man who had finally been exposed. The closing arguments only sealed the officer's fate. The prosecution tried to salvage what was left of their case, but the veteran's lawyer delivered a devastating summation that left no room for doubt. He reminded the jury of the video footage, the witnesses, and the veteran's impeccable character. He pointed out the arrogance and inconsistency in the officer's testimony, and he asked a simple question. If a man who served this country with honor can't trust those who wear a badge, who can? The jury deliberated for hours, but the verdict, when it came, was decisive. The officer was found guilty of misconduct and perjury, and the veteran was fully exonerated. The courtroom erupted, not with noise, but with a heavy, collective sigh of relief. Justice, for once, had not been blind. As the officer was led away, his badge no longer gleaming but instead a hollow reminder of the power he abused, he glanced at the veteran. For the first time, there was no arrogance in his eyes, only defeat. The veteran didn't gloat or even smile. He simply stood tall, knowing that this battle, unlike the ones overseas, had been fought with words, evidence, and truth. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, eager to get the veteran's statement. He simply said, "A badge doesn't make you untouchable. What makes a man untouchable is integrity, and that's something no uniform can give you." His words echoed across the steps as cameras flashed, but he wasn't interested in fame or recognition. He only wanted to make sure no one else had to endure what he went through. That day marked the end of one man's unchecked power and the beginning of a broader conversation about accountability. The veteran walked away quietly, blending into the crowd, his head held high. He knew that real strength didn't come from a badge, a title, or a weapon. It came from standing up for what was right, no matter how powerful the opponent seemed. And in that moment, he had done exactly that.